Good morning on this Sunday, January 19th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. The 2025 legislative session is underway as Governor Brian Kemp lays out his priorities. And as most of you have seen, tense moments under the Gold Dome as a state senator is led away in handcuffs. And several Georgians head to Washington as President-elect Trump is set to take office again. Melita, Phil, Theron, and Martha are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Governor Brian Kemp delivered the 2025 State of the State address on Thursday, outlining his priorities for the upcoming session.
The state of our state is not only strong, it is resilient.
Governor Brian Kemp spoke about the resiliency of Georgians after Hurricane Helene battered our state. In his budget proposal, he promised another $615 million to help farmers and other storm victims.
All Georgians need permanent relief from the historic storm of inflation. The past 3 years have drained family bank accounts, sapped the strength of our small businesses, and left too many Georgians struggling to make ends meet.
To all Georgians, he promised tax relief, reducing income taxes by $1 billion. Governor Kemp's health care proposal aims to expand the Georgia Pathways program to include Medicaid coverage for parents and legal guardians with young children in low-income households. He held firm against a full Medicaid expansion, saying Georgia is covering well over 200,000 more people than traditional Medicaid expansion would cover.
Georgia spends over $4.2 billion for Medicaid in our state. And there are those who say the program only needs more money to succeed. Well, I respectfully disagree.
Many Democrats say they were disappointed with the speech, saying the surplus Georgia has, state leaders should be investing more in education and health care. Theron, so to you first this week, as you heard, the governor said Georgia is covering 200,000 more folks than traditional Medicaid expansion. Do you agree with his numbers?
Well, a lot of us have got to go and look at the Georgia Pathways program and the Georgia Rise program, and I've been doing that. And there's some numbers there. I'll be honest with you, I did not know. I did not know we were paying so much to actually make sure that Medicaid eligible recipients could actually receive. However, there are still 100,000 more people, I think, that could be on Medicaid and actually with a full Medicaid expansion. What the governor did do, Lori, he set the tone. It really pumped up the Georgia Pathways and Georgia Rise program. The fact that I'm talking about it now on the show is a move from me as a moderate Democrat. I still believe that we can fully expand Medicaid in this state and we can pay for it. But I think that you see that he really wanted to make sure that he pushed back on a lot of critics in the media. The other thing that, real quick on healthcare, is that I think the Democrats are right. There's still much more we can do. We still have rural hospitals that are closing. We still have maternal mortality in the state, and that's one of the things that they talked about, particularly women of color who are suffering from this. And so again, the governor is definitely focused on talking about his programs, but also ultimately I think the Democrats are going to continue to push more we can do with a $16.5 billion surplus.
So I talked to Commissioner John King on Friday, and we talked about not only the programs you talked about, but Georgia Access also, where they are up to 1.5 million people. They're doing more subsidies than they would have gotten on ACA. And the big problem, just speaking as a person who helped run a small medical office, the big problem with Medicaid is how it pays. You know, it's not just, it doesn't cover everything you think it's going to cover, and they're slow paying. And the Georgia Access program, as well as the other Pathways programs, are better at paying on time with better fees. Phil?
Well, I think the governor is correct. I don't like a one-size-fits-all government-controlled healthcare program. I mean, how'd that work out with the post office and some of these other things? I'm for choice. I thought Democrats were for choice too. And I think that this is an option, the Pathways program that we're talking about, for people, low-income people. And I think it'll grow. And so, and just kind of maybe to skip over that, I'm really glad that there was full K through 12 education funding.
We're getting there.
I know we're going to get there.
We're getting there.
I like that. That was a good package, by the way, you did.
Thank you.
Well, the Democrats are right that more money needs to be allocated for education. Instead of giving vouchers for private schools, why not build up the low-performing public schools? Georgia ranks 26th in education in the U.S. World Report rankings of the states. And so there's a lot of room that some of this surplus could be spent to shore up public education and create the workers for the jobs that the economic development efforts are bringing into the state.
The governor's putting in $500 million for infrastructure needs. The money obviously needed if you look at all of the aging pipes across the state. We saw that massive water main break in Decab County this past week. Is this enough money, Martha?
It's never enough money. Okay, there's always more things you can spend on, but you want to be sure that when you allocate money, it's targeted and you know that you can be accountable for how the money is being spent. Nothing can be done overnight. I mean, I think all of us, or I've heard a lot of people spend the $16 billion surplus like 20 times. Okay, you've got to have some analogies there, or some priorities there. But I will say just really quickly on the on training for the next generation is the CTAE programs that are fully funded and the other things that are coming along with this funding. I'm sorry, career technical, agricultural, and engineering programs. These are preparing our workers to be ready when they get out of high school. And if you don't know anything about them, you ought to find out about them.
Well, that's something I need to look up. Martha, well, actually, let's go to Theron on this. More money in the budget for school resource officers after the Appalachia High School shooting. It was nice to see the governor recognize the mental health care workers who responded to the scene, also the First Lady and DBHDD Commissioner Kevin Tanner for their commitment to spreading the word about the 988 Crisis and Access Line. That's a project that I work on, so it was just nice to see that recognition.
And one of the things that I know my colleagues will agree, one of my, not necessarily talking points, one of my requests have been for the last year has been we should have a trained employee resource officer armed in every single school in Georgia, and the governor actually did that with this budget proposal. I think to really go back quickly on the $1 billion, what a lot of local leaders said is what Martha said, great start, right? But we need more because it's 159 counties in the state. But ultimately, going back to the schools, I think the governor really made it clear that teachers need to feel protected, but more importantly, parents need to know they can send their kids to school safely and they come home alive. And I think that that was something that, he really wanted to make sure that he emphasized. So I'll wait and see how much time will go by when we have every single resource officer in every single school. That includes elementary schools. But this was definitely a budget priority for the governor, and he was pretty defiant about it.
And Phil, there were also other issues that legislators discussed this week. The state Senate introduced the transgender sports bill. No surprise there.
Well, that's right, and I think that that's necessary to just make a stand here. The leadership of both the Senate and the House have said this has to be done. They called it the Opportunities Act for Fairness in Girls in Sports, and I think it's fairness is the key issue. And also, just a couple quick topics too. The hurricane relief was desperate. That was a top priority, and also, and we can talk about this later, but all of us on the panel here have really been critical, and rightly so, of the Department of Corrections. I did see more money. I don't think it was enough to pay. And I also said this as a quick footnote. You've got to separate these hardened, violent criminals who go into the system from these younger people who are just there and are going to be recruited. They are not doing the right thing in separating these inmates.
Good point. Melita, the Senate also voted to continue investigating Fulton County DA Fonnie Willis.
Yes, they did. And what can they do to a woman who was just reelected with 68% of the vote in a resounding majority, with the voters fully understanding what she had done? So it's just a way of harassing her and gaining headlines for them.
All right, we'll leave it there, folks, because the first week of the legislative session led to high drama in the hallways of the Capitol as a state senator is taken away in handcuffs. We'll discuss after the break.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
By now, you've seen this dramatic video. Here it is again. Tense moments inside the state capitol Thursday morning. Georgia state troopers arrested State Senator Colton Moore. The Republican has been banned from entering the House chamber. He was led away in handcuffs after he tried to force his way in for the governor's State of the State address. Phil, I want to go first to you. Give us a little background on why he's not welcome into the House chamber. And then there's some negotiations that we hear going on.
You're right. It goes back a year ago when Colton Moore, the state senator from a district in northwest Georgia, made all of these disparaging remarks about the late Speaker David Ralston. And I think the Speaker has every right. He controls the chamber. There's supposed to be decorum in that chamber. And so he said, if you don't apologize, you're banned. And so that's how all of this started. And then we fast forward to this year and to these fireworks here. And the Speaker warned this senator again in, you know, didn't apologize, you can't come in. Here's the problem. On the one side, you've got what is constitutional, and should an elected representative be allowed in a joint session? I think that's the key phrase. This was a joint session between with the Senate and House to listen to the governor's speech. He said he wanted to come in and listen. He was barred, and then things quickly got out of control, as you saw in the video here. Eventually, the staff member for the speaker threw this senator to the ground.
That's what a lot of people were asking me, is why were the troopers there if they were allowing these? And
that was my question too. Having been an Army military policeman and dealing with barroom fights or whatever, you're supposed to at some point intervene rather than standing there. I don't get it. I want to see what the protocols are.
They had also installed black curtains at either end of the hallway so that the public wouldn't see whatever happened. They were anticipating this, because it's not normal to have that many troopers at the entrance to the House.
Well,
I mean,
it was going to get out. The video went
expect.
viral. Yes, Theron, were you down there?
No, I was not down there at that moment, but I would tell you this. First and foremost, Melita's right. Look, we've had an increased presence at the Capitol with state troopers, and I want to thank every single woman and man that's there, because not only do they have to stand there and deal with this embarrassing, thing that we saw occur, but they have to make sure that people enter the Capitol safely. All right, so start there. Look, I know where Speaker Burns is on this. Speaker Ralston was my friend. Speaker Burns is my friend. And to Phil's point, I want our listeners to go with this. We all say things on this show. We say things to each other. But if you just apologize and say you're sorry, that is something, to Melita's point, I think that could have happened. Now, I don't know if Speaker Burns asked Senator Moore to apologize before coming over. I agree, this was definitely a premeditated stunt. It is embarrassing not only for the two people who were involved. What's the gentleman's name who kept him out of the...
Keith Williams.
Keith Williams, right? Keith Williams is a loyal general counsel to the Speaker. He was also worked for Speaker Ralston, right, as well. So they're doing what they're told to do. However, I do think this could have been handled a little differently and privately. And so what you've seen, Lori, is a bipartisan sort of outcome of people coming out and saying what Phil's saying, that maybe with it being a joint session, he could have been allowed in. But unfortunately now, because he pulled this stunt and he was pushed to the ground and now it's gone viral, we're not talking about the important business that the people of Georgia have sent those state reps and state senators there to talk about. So I hope that we will spend one segment on this, but hopefully these senators and reps will get back to the people's business that they've been elected to do.
Well, Martha, I'm sorry goes a long way in life and in politics.
And sometimes you say you're sorry even when it's not your fault. I mean, that's a big lesson you learn about mistakes. And I'm going to say, even more than him saying some disparaging things about Speaker Ralston, it was on the day of the unveiling of his portrait with his family in the Capitol. And that makes it even worse. People, Lord knows, they say things in speeches all the time that you wouldn't want to repeat to your mama, okay? That happens all the time. But this was a different kind of situation. He should have said he was sorry. We're talking about this instead of the governor's speech. And, I'm just disappointed, because they did meet ahead of time and they agreed to disagree, I think was the quote that came out of that. So he did not agree to apologize. So it shouldn't have happened this way, and I'm sorry about it, really.
All right, let's move on. The New Georgia Project, a grassroots organization founded by former gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, has been hit with a record-breaking $300,000 ethics fine for allegedly acting as an illegal super PAC. And the commission's investigation, which lasted 5 years, revealed that the organization raised $4 million in dark money and spent more than $3 million on campaign activities. Melita, this was quite a doozy.
It is, and we were just talking about apologizing and going on, and the Better Georgia had basically denied any allegations, but they have now admitted to improper behavior and the failure to file the proper kinds of documents and register as a political organization. And it is a huge fine, but there were huge amounts of money, $7 million, I think, spent on behalf of campaigns, and they'd been stonewalling for years, saying that they didn't do anything improper. So it's good that this is wrapped up, put away. A consent order has been agreed to, and there's a plan for repayment.
Phil.
Well, this is a disgrace, and I talked to David Amati, the chairman of the State Ethics Committee, and we think that this is the biggest fine for campaign finance violations in the country, let alone the state of Georgia. And Raphael Warnock, by the way, our U.S. Senator, was the CEO at after Stacey Abrams when all this was occurring, the hiding of money. Remember, too, that this dark money that the Democrats claim to hate was spent during the primary against Stacey Evans, also a Democrat, and this money was used to trash her unmercifully. They even, mocked her for being a white girl, and you remember all of that. It was awful. And then it was used, of course, in the general election campaign. I looked where all this money was dropped with direct mail and digital and all of that stuff. So this is a disgrace. I think that this should end the chapter of Stacey Abrams ever wanting to run for public office again in Georgia.
All right, moving on, the AJC reports 2 Republican state election board members who use private Gmail accounts for official business have refused to allow searches of their emails, leading to an accusation that they're violating government transparency laws. And the 2 election board members, Janice Johnston and former Georgia Gang panelist Janelle King, said they follow Georgia's open records laws and provide emails upon request. But they said they're unwilling to share their email accounts with government records officers. Martha.
Look, I'm on the State Board of Education, so I deal with this particular issue every day. You are not supposed to send official emails back and forth from a private email address. What I do when it happens because people know my email address, I immediately direct them over to my official email address, and that's what you should do. Now, your private email and your official email is subject to open records requests. But how it works right now is you get the request and then you go through and provide the emails. I kind of understand the argument that you don't want to turn over your password because you don't know what they'll do to your emails. It's so easy to change emails. I understand that, but you got to be a lot cleaner, and you've got to have a clear cut. I'm not blaming anybody here. The rules are complicated, but I deal with this every day, and I have to do it.
There needs to be a set policy.
There does need to be a set policy.
Exactly.
And in Janelle King's case, because she's on the Board of Corrections, and we've talked a lot about state prison transparency, it's a double whammy for her because she's also using a private email address for her work on that state board.
There's nothing wrong with using a private address. She is a volunteer like many of these people on these boards. She gets no money for this. And you made a good point here. I wouldn't want to give up my password either because we all know this. We've discussed it. The State Elections Board is feuding with the Secretary of State's office. And they have to try to work with the Secretary of State's office, but they don't want, they'll give up, and there's no problem with them giving up their private email addresses. And I talked to Janelle King. That's not an issue. Now, there is a lawsuit going on with one of the other state election board members, so that kind of put a kink in everything. But I can see both sides of this. I don't think anybody's breaking the law. It's just they're trying to protect emails, but they will release them if they have to.
All right, up next, several Georgia supporters of President-elect Trump head to Washington for his inauguration. We'll discuss next.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Tomorrow is Inauguration Day in our nation's capital as President-elect Trump gets ready to take the oath of office once again. Martha, lots of Trump supporters are in Washington for all the festivities.
Yeah, and it's a complicated day because, the Monday after Dr. King's birthday, which is January 15th, always is King Day. So it's King Day, it's Inaugural Day, but the Inauguration Day is always January 20th. It doesn't matter what day that falls on. And then it's college football game. So J.D. Vance says you might see him on his phone watching that game during the balls there, but I'm not going this year. I'm going to host a group of listeners to watch, and then I've been before, so I think everybody should do it once, but I'm going to watch it on TV.
There, and it's falling on King Day.
It is, and I was a little late coming in here today because I was with the Northeast Georgia Labor Council. They celebrated MLK Day, and it was a great event. And a lot of them were like, "Oh, are you going back up to D.C. for the inauguration?" So unfortunately, like Martha, I will not be going. But I did go to Washington D.C. this week, Melita, and I was there for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And I'll tell you this: there's tremendous amount of barricades and security, so they're prepping, for a cold inaugural event. But I will say this: I think President-elect Trump when he becomes president, so I'll call him president, when our next show, when he officially gets sworn in, has an opportunity here, Lori, to really heal this country. There's a lot going on. I mean, we're talking about, what happened with Colton Moore, but let's not forget about what happened in New Orleans. Let's not forget about what's happening in this country. So I really hope the president-elect actually will speak unity and will calm the waters a little bit on both sides by being a leader that the people elected him to be.
That's a good point.
Can I say something real quick? I think you can celebrate both of these things as Americans. I'll never forget when I was there in 2017 at bipartisan inaugural ball in Washington, D.C. I saw Congressman David Scott, a Democrat. He was the only Democrat there, and I walked up, shook his hand, and I said, "I'm glad to see you here." He says, "You know what? I don't agree with a lot of what Trump says, but he is our president, and I'm here to celebrate that."
All right. Well, the U.S. Department of Energy finalized a $6 billion loan for Rivian, paving the way for the U.S. automaker to build its plant here in Georgia, about an hour east of Atlanta. Construction is set to begin in 2026. This massive economic development project expected to create 7,500 high-paying jobs for that area. Martha.
Well, expected. I think this was an expected thing. They're not going to let this project go. It has had a bumpy road, let's just say. It's a truck. It's had a bumpy road. But I'm glad to see they're going to do it, and I'm glad to see the jobs are going to come to Georgia.
And Theron, I work with Rivian. A poll released that they ran by Rosetta Stone Communications. So 75% of respondents who live in that area support the project, which will bring a massive amount of high-paying jobs, almost 8,000 jobs to that area.
Well, one of the things that you hear Democrats and Republicans talking about is how working class Americans really spoke loudly during this election that they wanted more opportunities to have working class jobs. The fact is that you can have a robust debate about why the money is needed and what happened, but ultimately, I don't know about you, Lori, I see a lot of Rivian trucks around Georgia, and the people are going to have an opportunity who live in that district, in those areas, to go high. When we're talking about high-paying jobs, I mean, these are jobs that can change families from being a low-poverty family to a middle-class family. And so I think the jobs aspect is worth everything that we're doing here.
All right, moving on. DeKalb County had another massive water main break this week. The water issue continues to plague the county as the new CEO, Melita Lorraine Cochran-Johnson, takes over.
Yes, and the boil water advisory continued even into Friday morning, and it affected more than 20,000 people in Toco Hills, Druid Hills, Emory area. But the thing is, this is indicative of the infrastructure she inherits. She's going to have to make some tough decisions about water rates, about infrastructure improvements, and these problems didn't happen overnight, and she deserves the grace to try and repair them and make this good. What you have in some ways is DeKalb became the bedroom community for the city of Atlanta. So DeKalb County's infrastructure is a good 25 years or so behind Atlanta's infrastructure. And so you have Lorraine Cochran-Johnson being thrust into the role that Shirley Franklin had for becoming a water and sewer county commission chair, as Shirley Franklin was a water and sewer mayor.
Phil, a lot of city and county leaders really kicked the can down the road on a lot of these issues, and across Georgia, I'm not saying, except maybe for Mayor Shirley Franklin.
Well, I agree with that, and yes, if this is an inherited problem, this should have been dealt with years ago, and no one likes a tax increase, but it looks like they're having to have one.
Yeah. All right, coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned, everyone.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, Phil, we'll start with you.
All right, I got a winner, and it's our new congressman from Georgia, Brian Jack. He got appointed by the House Speaker as on the Rules Committee, which is very influential. I mentioned earlier in the show another winner, David Amati, the head of the State Ethics Committee chair. They fined this historic fine against Stacey Abrams. That was a lot of work, and I'm proud of them. And also the Georgia Municipal Association. We've been talking about tort reform that the governor's trying to push. I didn't learn, except from them, that the sovereign immunity does not apply to cities when there's damages. Like in the city of Milton, there was an accident. The ruling is the city of Milton has to pay far more than their budget because of this accident. It was an excellent example of why there's many facets to tort reform, why we need this fixed.
Interesting. All right, Melita?
Well, I'd like to pay tribute to the queen of Southern cuisine, Natalie Dupree, who died last Sunday. Most Southern kitchens have at least one of her 15 cookbooks, and she really jump-started Atlanta's culinary culinary influence. And then I just want to make everybody aware that an army of super cute and enthusiastic Girl Scouts are coming soon to your door, email box, or supermarket table, and my granddaughter is one of them. So if you must say no to these budding entrepreneurs, do it gently.
Well, you can also send them overseas to our troops, so
Yes.
even if you don't want the extra calories, right, Theron?
Absolutely. All right, as we mentioned earlier, happy King Day to everyone. I think that tomorrow we remember that it's a day on, not a day off. Let's do everything that Dr. King stood for. That was peace, that was social justice, women's rights, but also I think we can learn a little bit from him as far as civil obedience and nonviolent protests. Also want to extend my extreme condolences to Athens icon, Reverend Dr. Winford M. Hope. He was the president emeritus, Reverend Emeritus, Pastor Emeritus at Ebenezer Baptist Church. He passed away at the age of 80. And then lastly, two quick shout outs. Norm and Kima Trawick, Fresh Treasure Gourmet Bistro. Big fans of the show. I meant to shout them out last week, but thank y'all so much for watching.
Nice, we love to hear from them.
So, winner this week, Joel McElhannon, who many of us know, has a new company, Athens Spirit Company. He's got a very good bourbon, so it is. We might all need that. We might all need that. And then Brian Kemp for a great agenda. But really, you talked about unity, and I think that it's important we have that. We're seeing all the corporations line up behind Donald Trump. There is an inaugural Diet Coke, which I'm very excited about.
I saw that.
But a loser is Joe Biden in the speech that he gave the other night. It was very negative, and it wasn't unifying. So he's my loser.
We'll leave it there. See you next week.